honestly, just having a good attitude and being reliable, I think that that is probably the reason why I've done everything that I have. I know people that have like all the chops in the world and they're like, I don't have any gig. At the end of the day, it's like, does someone want to spend a month straight with you? Can they tolerate you? Are you going to be a problem? I think those things like go such a long way.
Well, everybody, welcome back to the Drum Show. I am excited. We've got another guest, and everybody, welcome Jessica Goodwin, to the show. So I always love, it's something that I do in my spare time. Is I like to find players and I like to follow them for a long period of time. And Jess and I were just talking. She said, I didn't even know you knew who I was. I said, well, I try to keep my beat on quite a few people. I try to follow what's going on. And especially I loved being, this past year and a half being back out on the road, because of all the drummers I got to meet, that I didn't even know existed, and they're playing with great, and it's like, man, and you just I keep a Rolodex of everybody, and I just love, I love the community that we have. So now, Jess, you're
Absolutely.
in LA, right?
Yeah. Yep. I've been
Awesome.
out here for 15 years now.
Where are
Quite
you
quite a
originally from?
while. Las Vegas.
Ah, really, Las Vegas. That is, so did you grow up there?
Yeah.
Really? Wow. It's
Oh
not,
yeah.
Las Vegas is like top of my not favorite cities, but I keep thinking it's because I didn't have a really good experience there. But like Oklahoma City. The first time I went through, there was shows. I hated it. Worst city in the U.S. And then the next time I went, I was like, oh, I had a better experience. It's one of the best, So I keep thinking maybe I just haven't had that Vegas experience that brings it up. Oh no, you're saying no. You're
Yeah,
like, no,
yeah, I don't think so. I think you're spot on.
But yeah, we would go there and the band be like, "You want to go out?" And I'm like, "I would rather have a lobotomy than do that right now." But that's just me.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know.
No,
So
I
okay,
feel the same.
so you're from Vegas. How did you? I don't want to do the typical. Let's get started from the beginning. But let's let everybody know like what you're doing right now. So you're playing with several groups, though. How many groups are you playing with now?
That's a good question. You know,
That's not
I
a bad
have
answer.
I have a handful of people that I play with regularly, some of which do a couple shows a year, and some of which I do things with all the time. So that's why it's like a little bit hard to say. But I have a couple of like main people that I play with, I would say.
Okay. Now,
It's so hard to.
are you mainly? I don't want to say road dog because I guess it's a derogatory. But are you mainly on the road or are you in town?
A combination.
A combination. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So when did you get started playing the drums, and how did you make your way to LA to pursue that?
Well, I started playing in a band in middle school. I started in choir and I was like, oof, this is horrible. This is not my thing at all. So I convinced my dad to buy me a drum pad and I joined the school band and I played in band uh, at Las Vegas Academy, which is like a performing arts high school. Went for percussion, did like a year of jazz band, played in a punk band outside of school. So that was kind of more me. Yeah, and
What was the name of the punk band?
oh God, it was Local 15.
Yes, mine was the Goodies. So we
Ooh,
we all
that's way cooler.
we all have we were a straight edge punk band from deep South Mississippi. There was like one of us,
Wow.
So yeah, we did all the local talent shows. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
So everybody's got that band. So you're playing in
Hmm.
that in high school, and or you said you was the performing arts school high school, or was that?
Yeah, that was high school. Yep.
Okay, very cool. And then moved to Vegas after you graduated, or what?
I moved to LA a few years later, and I actually didn't move out here for music. I wasn't playing at the time, and I was kind of, I don't know, sorting myself out and going through some hard stuff. And I started working at the Viper Room just to find like a job. And then I was seeing music every night, and I was like, oh my God, I forgot. that I'm a musician and I love this. This is like my entire heart, you know? So I got back into it from there, and that's how I like met the initial like musicians and people that I knew in LA.
That's awesome. Yeah, I didn't have a huge appreciation for why people live in California until really this past year. Whenever we spent like not 2 weeks, 2 months out west, kind of wandering
Mm.
out west, and we had 4 days off in Mission Beach, and every day
Mm.
I woke up and got like, acai bowl and sat on the beach. And I'm like, I mean, I get it. I get it. Okay. I understand, but after 4 days,
Yes.
I was like, all right, it's time to go. It's time to go home. Um,
Mm.
so, we were talking before we started the call. For everybody that's watching this, I'm always really quick to push record, because if not, it can be a drummer I've never met, and all of a sudden we start jamming on stuff, and 30 minutes later I'm like, oh crap, I think we just forgot to record the podcast. It's like we just talked about everything, and so you rehash it, but it's never as good as the first time.
Mm.
So we were talking some about some topics we could maybe jam on. One I would like to touch on, that I always tend to touch on, and I get some kickback from people, but I'm very interested in the perspective of a female in a male dominated instrument, and I'm interested in their perspective, and how they
Hmm.
navigate that. If it's any different for some, it's like, no, I think it's the same. And for others, I have students and they tell me it's very different for me when I play a club behind a guy, or they said the comments I get are
Hmm.
very different than what the others get. So I'm always interested in
Hmm.
hearing kind of that perspective. I remember we had Elizabeth Chan on here, who she's just she's a powerhouse. And she was talking about something I'd never thought about. And she said, I'm not as big. She said, as a matter of fact, I'm like twice as small as some of the guy drummers that I know. And she said, so for
Hmm.
me to get the kind of power, at that time she was with Carrie Underwood. She said, for me to
Hmm.
get the kind of power that they get, she said, I sit up real high. And I said, well, why do you sit up real high? And she said, because then I can put my body weight into hitting the drum. She said, guys that are, or bigger bodied people, she said, they typically can hit harder, but I have to kind of get my body into it. And I just never thought about that. So I said, I've
Hmm.
just always been a 225-pound guy, and just never thought that, like, because my wife is small, and I'm like, wow, she would have to put some, so I don't know if there's any similar experiences or things like that, because I have a ton of female students that are just like crushing
Hmm.
it.
Yeah, I think I mean, I would say yes, that the experience of a female musician in a male-dominated instrument and industry, I think it's very, very different. And I think that what I've experienced over the years, I mean, it's definitely changed a lot, right? Like there's so much more visibility now for women, and um, it's not like an anomaly to see a female drummer anymore. It's like
Yeah.
more, out in the open. When I was growing up, it was like, especially in a punk scene, it's like, it was, how does your boyfriend like his drums set up? That was
Yeah.
kind of the,
I was going to say there were
that was
like
the
three girl
baseline.
drummers that we knew of, and it's like, we don't know where the rest of them are, but I'm sure they're out there. But
Hmm.
now you're very correct. There's tons of killer players out there,
Hmm.
that I love finding out about, yourself included. And that's the thing. I think that's one of the wonderful things that the internet's brought us, along with other things, but is the ability to have kind of an equal playing field, if you will.
Hmm. Yeah, we're definitely making progress, but I still think that, I mean, the experience at shows. I was in a band that was an all-female band put together by one of the members of the Misfits, and we were touring with them. And it's just like that crowd is like so male dominated and just so like you could just feel like the like what are these girls doing here kind of vibe on stage, you know?
Like
um,
when you feel that, I've talked about this before. When you play live, there's an energy that comes
mhm,
from the audience. Like there's an energy that you give as the band, and there's an energy that the audience gives you, and sometimes that
mhm,
energy it doesn't. Sometimes it's just like, what are you? You're looking at the audience like, what are you all doing? What's going on here? Like, what happened in the room before we came on? Um,
Yeah.
and maybe some nights they're looking at the band going the same way. But there's a definite energy that and it's almost palpable in the room that you can feel, especially the smaller the club. You can
Mm,
feel. I remember there was a show last year. It was not our crowd. Like we were playing with a band that it was not our crowd, and you could
hmm
tell. Like you could tell the entire show we were playing. They were just like, when are they getting off? And then we play the next night, and the crowd loves, and it's just like, you know.
hmm
So how did you manage that?
Oh
How did you
yeah.
did that kind of put a chip on your shoulder to kind of show them why you were there, or what? How do you manage that?
Um, God, I mean, I feel like I don't know that it put a chip on my shoulder, but I feel like we have to like go out of our way to prove ourselves to people, you know?
Hmm.
And another thing I like to say is that I've experienced like playing shows and, going to say like merch afterwards to meet people and chat or whatever. And a lot of the feedback is, oh, wow, I was really surprised that you knew how to play your instrument. So it's like the baseline is that people see you on stage as a woman and they think that the assumption is that you probably can't play.
Hmm.
And then you're just like, they're pleasantly surprised when you can. So I feel like the baseline for a woman, and I like to ask people too, I'm like, let me ask you a question. Would you have said the same thing if I was a male?
Hmm.
And that really kind of blows people's heads off, because I don't think the answer is ever really yes.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's hard for people to understand. That even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was just a kind of a different playing field. And if you haven't been in the industry
Hmm
that long, you really didn't see that shift. I did a video on the top, to highlight some women drummers, and it was interesting to go back and look because it was very, the drum set came around like what the 1920s, just before the 1920s, it kind of started getting cobbled together down in New Orleans on the boats down there on the river, and it was interesting to watch because that's about the time that the women's rights movement came around. People forget they didn't have the right to vote. And it's like right
mm
around that 1920 time, it also started. And so if you like follow both of those things, it's really interesting to see the correlations between the two, whether it be Mo Tucker having a completely an androgynous look on stage, which was, girls were supposed to be all dolled up when they got on stage, whether it be Karen Carpenter
hmm
uh, highlighting the
hmm
drum set, but then also having issues with an eating disorder, going back to she was supposed to be this perfect thing on stage. It was really interesting to watch that, and to watch some of the drummers be some of the pioneers of that. Like, no, you can be a female drummer. You don't have to wear a bunch of makeup. You can, just wear baggy
hmm
jeans or whatever. It was really
hmm
interesting to watch that, but people forget. They don't go back and look at the history of it. So I don't think there's as big of an appreciation for it, and
mm
for the opportunities that there are out there now that there just weren't
hmm
20 years ago, whether we liked it or not. So
Yeah.
I, I've got a question for you because we kind of touched on it before we started, and I didn't want to dive too deep into it, so so we didn't miss all the good stuff. You were talking about mental health, and as it pertains to drumming, as it pertains to being on the road, a lot of people don't quite get what it's like when you're in the middle of a tour season, what that's like to
hmm
be, 7 weeks into an 8-week run where you're just, worn out, nobody's sleeping, you're changing time zones every day,
hmm
and mental health becomes a really big issue. And like the smallest thing can not only set you off, it can set the whole crew off, and kind of throw things apart. So,
hmm
you had mentioned that. Give me some, background on that with you and how you manage that with yourself.
I mean, it's definitely changed over the years, but I think that mental health has always been like finding out how to care for my mental health with like depression and anxiety, and things like that. It's definitely been a lifelong journey, but I think at first being on tour and I didn't know how to ask for what I needed, or I didn't know how to like take care of myself physically so that I feel better mentally. And yeah, I think that over the years it just becomes like more fine-tuned and you're like you get to this point where you're like, I know myself, I know what I need, I know how to ask for what I need. I know those moments when I just need to go take a nap because the show's going to be a million times better. Just it's so hard to put into like such a concise, like little snippet of information. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's like,
everybody used to ask, "Well, what do y'all do before the show?" And I think that they were expecting something really cool. And I was like, well, we eat and then everybody takes a nap. And, and they're like, you guys take a nap? I'm like, yeah, usually when we get to the stage, we've been up for like maybe 20 minutes. So, it's like, I thought you would be, doing something. I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. That seems exhausting. I want to play a good show. So what's your,
yeah.
speaking of mental, so what would be like your pre-show, routine? Or what does a day look like for you, involving some of those things that, are more self-care things that help you be the player that you want to be? I know for me, I'll give an example. I know for me, we would land in a town. I don't sit very well, like sitting on a bus, and I'm not a real good sitter. So, I mean, I was up in the morning and usually out the door with a backpack. And in most cities, I walked anywhere from 5 to 10 miles a day. And it was a really good way for me it wasn't like, I didn't like put my joggers on and, I wasn't dumb about it, but I just kind of took off in whatever city we were in. I was like, oh, I guess I'm just going to go, if there was a coffee shop 2 miles away, I was like, well, I'm going to walk it, until sound check at least. So what is that? And I've kept that up when I got back, and came off the road in January. I was like, man, I kind of want to keep that up. So now my studio's here in a small town. And I just walked up to the square to buy a thing of coffee. Usually I would have driven that, but it's like, a 3/4 of a mile there, 3/4 of a mile back. And I'm sure the locals think I'm an idiot, but the guy that owns the business next door, he's like, you're always walking somewhere. I'm like, well, so what are some things that you kind of do during your day to make sure that you're the best you can be?
hmm I definitely try to incorporate some type of exercise, stretching. If I feel like a little nervous about the show, warming up, maybe listening to some songs in the set if I need to. Um, Definitely for me, like food is really important, but not like an hour before the show or less, because we've all
Yeah,
been in that situation where we want to throw up on stage because
no good.
we just ate.
And if you haven't been in that
um,
situation and you're playing a large show, don't eat about an hour before the show.
yeah. But I think too, I mean, people will laugh when I say this constantly because I am an introvert at heart. And people are like, how can you be on stage, and like be a performer for a living and not, be an introvert? And I'm like, it's possible. But for me, I need like some alone time to kind of just like recharge and to center myself. And sometimes, especially on tour, that might look like you said, taking a walk to a coffee shop, just kind of clearing my mind a little bit. Or if I'm not in a situation where I have any privacy, I love like some sound isolating headphones, just listen to some music that I like, or meditation or something like that, and just, create my own personal space within, being around people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are kind of the main tools, just kind of like getting centered in my body. I think that stretching helps me get in my body. I don't like to do too much right before I play. Like it kind of can be overwhelming if there's a bunch of people in the dressing room or something. And you're like, oh my God, this is like too overstimulating. I need to like focus on the task at hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I was somewhat the same way. One of the things because I came off the road a long time ago, and then, going back out, it was different. Obviously, you're more mature and, know yourself a little bit better, as you said. The hardest thing for me
mhm,
was sleep, having my sleep patterns interrupted, it was really tough for me. And
Hmm.
I can handle a lot if I get enough sleep, but if I don't get enough sleep, things start falling apart. It's like that.
Same. Yep.
The Roots had an album, "Things Fall Apart." Anyway, it made me think of that. I just played that for my son the other day. I was like, "You got to listen to this." He's like, "Who's this band?" I'm like, "Nah, okay, sit down. We're about to listen to the Roots." Um, but one of the things I found that I enjoyed every day was we had, there were 7 or 8 of us on the crew, depending on the time. And so we didn't have roadies. Once the stuff got to the stage, I would handle setting it all up and everything. And when I
Hmm.
first went back out, because I was with them about a year and a half, I was like, I can either really hate this time or I can just like consider this kind of a therapeutic time. So I would spend 45 minutes sometimes, and that was my time to set up my drums how I wanted them. And instead of
Hmm.
trying to like rush through it like I used to, I just would take
Hmm.
my time. Sometimes I'd put on some music, sometimes headphones, sometimes it would just be my phone sitting on the floor playing music. And I would just
Yeah.
slowly and methodically go through the same process. I put it together the same way most of the time every day. And then, checking all the things. I'd go through and check all my lugs and my tunings. I'd make sure that everything was working, get my backup gear. And it took about 45 minutes, but it became a
Hmm.
really almost therapeutic time for me to really reconnect with the instrument, see what had happened, assess the damage from the night before, see if anything needed to be replaced, see if any of the girls were cracked up and needed some help, and I needed to order something new, or you know, um,
Uh-huh.
and it was kind of like that time for me to do that. Whereas used to, I would have tried to rush through that, and it wouldn't have been something that I enjoyed. And I had a roadie sitting there
Mm.
one day at a festival. He said, "Can we help you?" And I said, "No, really, you're good. Just don't touch anything. I got it." And I was setting it up, and he was like, "Man, this is like therapy sitting here watching you do that." And I was like, "What?" And he said, "You're just like really methodically going through and setting the stuff up, man. It's really chilling me out." And I said, "Well, I'm glad I can do that for you." I said, "I could be mad about it, but is there, do you find that time? I didn't love the teardown time. Teardown time is not my favorite, but the setup time, I learned to enjoy it, I guess. As you've kind
Hmm.
of gotten older doing this, and I don't know how old you are, it doesn't matter. But as you've matured into the craft, do you find any of those things you used to find annoying? Do you find that you're enjoying them now?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely like the setup time and I like caring for my things. I love being organized. I think that that's kind of some of the fine tuning that can also, I don't know, be a little zen in the moment, just knowing that you have all your things kind of taken care of in place and have everything, like you said, set up in advance is really nice because I like to stage things right away during load in, like as soon as I can. So I'm like, I know it's done. And if something's wrong, I'll have time between right now and even sound check sometimes to sort something out or whatever needs to happen. If, God forbid, if and when something breaks.
Yeah, well, that's our sound guy. Because as soon as we were loaded in, I was setting up, and finally after a few
Hmm.
months, he's like, "Hey, man, can you just give me some time to lay my lines before you go setting up?" I said, "Yeah, that's fine. I was just wanted to be set up in case you needed anything." And so I would wait for that
Hmm.
text, every day, and I'd get the text and he'd say, "Okay, we're ready." So I'd come scooting in, to set up. But I was the same way. I was kind of just waiting on go
Hmm.
to get it set up because I don't like rushing through things, and I don't like going on stage feeling like I don't know that everything is where I need it to be, and not going to
Oh,
break on
yeah,
me. So
absolutely.
so what's the how long have you been back into music? I guess I should ask that first because you said you moved to LA and you were working in the Viper Room. So how long have you
Hmm.
kind of how long has it been since you kind of got back into things?
I think I slowly started getting back into things maybe around 2009 or 2010.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And what are some of the things that you have done that you feel have made you successful at this? Because I was talking to, I had Dr. John Wooten, he's one of my old professors. I had him on earlier this morning. We recorded a podcast, and I was talking to him, and I said, everybody thinks that the playing is the thing, and the playing is the thing, but it is the thing. But if I show up to a session here in Nashville, that's actually the thing that's expected. That's, if that starts coming up as like, I don't know if they can play this, there's a problem there, right? Because that's why they hired me.
Mm-hmm.
I tell everybody, I say, it's really like the 99% is in the other stuff outside of the playing. Once you have your playing together, it's your interactions, it's your personality. What are some of the things that you've done that you felt have made it, or have given you the ability to do this on the level that you're doing it at?
I completely agree with everything you said, and I think that it's so much more than the playing. I mean, I'm kind of in the position where I'm like, I'm never going to be like the best drummer, but I know that when I show up for something, I'm prepared. I have notes, I take notes, I am reliable, I'm on time, I have a good attitude. I'm always like, my mindset always is, how do I serve the music? I'm not here for me, I'm here to support the artist. So what is best for them? And I think having a sense of like humility around my part in the bigger equation, and honestly just having a good attitude and being reliable, I think that is probably the reason why I've done everything that I have, in a sense, because I know people that have like all the chops in the world and they're like, I don't have any gigs. And I'm like, I could never play what you're playing. That would take me like through the end of my life to try to figure out what that fill was that you just did or whatever. But I think, at the end of the day, it's like, does someone want to spend a month straight with you? Can they tolerate you? Are you going to be a problem? You know what I mean? It's just, I think those things like go such a long way. So especially in LA, I mean, I'm sure this is everywhere. Like, it's a small world. And so you do have a reputation. And so, there's a lot of times that people reach out to me and say, hey, someone referred me to you. Someone that's worked with me referred me to you, or someone that saw you play referred me to you. And it's just like, people refer me because they had a good experience with me or because they enjoyed working with me. And I think that literally is like, can be the reason why you succeed at the end of the day in so many ways.
This podcast is brought to you by the Drum Better Daily program. That's actually my online drum school that I've run now for 12 plus years. Not only have I been playing the drums professionally since the age of 15, I've been teaching since the age of 18. Matter of fact, I talked to one of my first student a few days ago. I actually called him to see if he could sub a gig out for me. Daniel, love you, man. And he's still playing. He's still doing it on a pro level. I would love to have you go check it out at stevensdrumshed.com. You can find a link to that in the show notes or video description, whichever platform you're watching it on. But it truly is a community of like-minded drummers where we are striving to just be the best that we can be at the drums. In addition to over 70 pre-recorded drum courses, there's also a tech talk area where we talk about everything technology related as it pertains to the drums, e-kits, recording, doing videos, all of that stuff. There are forums where you can hang out with the other students as well. We do 2 live video student calls every week that you can join if you'd like to. We do guest artist calls monthly, and I'll even make you a personalized lesson plan if that's what you need. Yes, we talk about the nuts and bolts of drumming. Yes, I give you exercises, but we also talk a lot about how to practice more efficiently, how to practice better, and how to get more out of your practice time. I know you're just like me. You're busy, you're being pulled by work, by family, by friends, by other responsibilities. Whenever you practice, you really want to see gains and have it be productive. That is what we focus on in the Drum Better Daily program. I'll have to say personally, it's been really cool because some of these students I've worked with for over 12 years, we started running drum camps last year in 2022, and I got to meet some of them in person for the first time. Those drum camps have been selling out. They've been just blowing my mind with how much fun they are and how great a time it is to bring the community together in person. A community that was started online and has been going online strong now for over 12 years. I'd love to have you be a part of it.
I think so too. I was having a discussion with somebody. It was another teacher online. He had asked kind of a baited question, and but it's centered around, do you think social media is a necessary component of a professional musician's life now? In other words, if you're going to be a professional musician, you have to have that. And I chimed in with, no, I don't think that. I know a lot of musicians that are ghosts on social media, and they work more than most people I know. And actually in Nashville, that used to be the cool thing, like, you know, especially the session players, like, you know, it was like you were contacting, you know, this magi that was up on the mountain. You're like, could you please come down and play a session, you know, and you had to go through 15 people to get their number. And some of the cats are still like that. It's like, wow. I'm really trying to get their number. And they're like, well, I need to speak with them first and make sure they're okay with me giving. I'm like, how do these guys get work? You're like, you know, don't give my number. I know you know my number. Please don't give it to people unless you ask me first. And then I'll tell you if it's okay. I'm like, no, give them my number. So, you know, all of my playing, you know, gigs and stuff have always come from in-person stuff, from being referred to them from, I think the social media is good as like proof of like, hey, you can go see this video of them playing there just to see who they are and what they're doing. But as far as like, is it a necessary component? I don't feel it is. I still think that the old school method of like meeting people, talking to them face to face. I'm an introvert too. So it's, you know, it's not the easiest thing for me to do, to sit there and make small talk with people. I like in-depth talk, but small talk is difficult for me, with people I'm never going to see again. Breaking the ice is like, I would just rather sit there in silence if I'm, that sounds awful. Like if I'm sitting next to someone and I'm never going to see you again. And it's just like, we don't have to talk. We could just sit here and everybody could be quiet, you know? It's like, let's get together, everyone in our own houses by ourselves. So I think that for me, I feel that model can still work, although the other one can still work. We see great examples of that with like Grayson Kretman, who is an incredible player. And I think his social media has done great for him. So what's Jess's take on the role that social media has played? And do you think it's like, no, you have to have this, you know, to have a career in music these days?
I'm sure there's a way that you don't have to, but I would say that you would be selling yourself short if you didn't use such an incredible tool that we have to be public. And like the first thing that someone's going to do or in my experience, when they are like, okay, we want you to come audition or whatever, it's like usually the first thing is, what's your social media? And that acts as your resume. So, you know, people want to see that you're out there, that what you've done, what you look like. I mean, I think that's another aspect of, and I don't know if you feel the same way about this, but I feel like looking the part is important too. You know, it's like when someone's looking at the aesthetic of a band, does this person look like they would fit? Or, you know what I mean? I think about like dressing the part. Who am I playing with? What clothes do I want to wear so I mesh on stage with these people so we look cohesive? I think it's such a great tool. I think usually jobs for me come from DMs on Instagram. So I can't imagine not having that as a tool, and especially that it's a free resource. Yeah, and it's a great like networking tool, as much as I absolutely hate social media and it gives me anxiety all the time, you know?
Yeah, I think that not enough people think about the vibe of the group that you're playing with, and do you fit that vibe? Like Southern rock is not my genre, although I just spent a year and a half in the Southern rock genre, which was really fun because Southern rock to me before that, even though I'm from South Mississippi, was Lynyrd Skynyrd, that was pretty much it. And I didn't love Leonard Skinner because one time I had to play Sweet Home Alabama 4 times in one shift on Bourbon Street, and I was done. Like I was like, Southern rock, I'm out. Like I don't like it, you know. And so it allowed me to actually be with guys that really loved Southern rock, and they could kind of hit me to like, no, you need to listen to this, you need to listen to this. And so I got to discover Southern rock, which oddly enough, I'd never really dove into it. But it was definitely not I definitely didn't look like I belonged there without changing some of at least my clothes, you know. And I mean, I was a bearded guy, and that's kind of a prerequisite when you're in Southern rock. It's just a lot of bearded guys walking around
Nailed it.
in black shirts. That's beards and black shirts is pretty much how that works. And and so there were some things that but I think it's important to point out, because even though you look the part for the different groups you play in, I think that there's always, you always look like Jess in the pictures that I've seen, in the groups that I've seen, in the music that I've seen. So you're able to kind of spin the look. And I think people should be able to do this, like, oh, this is the vibe I'm in. I'm going to do this, but it's going to be kind of in my style. And this will be, you know, how I look in this particular setting. And so that's interesting. That's something that you think about a lot then, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard other drummers talk about this as well. I think that people appreciate the attention to detail with things like that, you know, and when you look back on photos or videos and stuff like that, I mean, it's what we do is visual. And so not considering the visual component of it is, I don't know, something that I always consider the visual
I do too.
of it.
And that's an interesting point, you know, especially when as a band, you're listening back to a board tape from the night before, let's say. And to me, it's really on a context. And I have a real hard time, I don't have a hard time listening to it and deciphering what was, okay, we need to clean this up, do that. But I also have a hard time understanding, like, well, wait, what was happening at that moment, you know? Was the bass player, you know, pointing his guitar at somebody and bent over and sticking his tongue out, and that's why he was a little behind the beat? Like, what was happening there?
Right.
You know, was I standing up screaming? I don't know. Like, what was happening during the show? Because, you know, there's a great book called Musicking, and he discusses the concept of music being a community act. And so just as much as the musicians are a part of it, so is the person that, you know, cleaned the facility. So is the person that made the chairs. So is the person that's serving the beer in the back. They're all a part of this activity we call musicking. And you can have the same show at a different venue, and it'll be completely different. The vibe will be different. It won't feel good. And then the next night you play the same set, and it feels great. Or you play at the same venue 2 nights in a row, and it's completely different. You know, what is that? Why is it that it feels different? And I think it's that musicking thing. I think that it's a collaboration between the people on stage and the people in the audience. And I think it's important to realize that visual is, and to me, the smells and the touch, you got people rubbing up against you. You're sweating. Like, a concert is different. So for me, isolating that audio and trying to listen to it without the video present, for me, it loses something. I don't know if it's the same for you, but I don't play differently, but my energy is definitely different whenever I'm playing live versus if I'm just in a studio recording.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because I'm not going to stand up on my drums in the studio. You know, I'm not going to, like, there's no reason to. It's like nobody's looking.
Right.
And I used to be, I was in a band on Universal Records when I had first moved to Nashville. And our guitarist, I love him to death. I'm like best friends with him. But he, you know, he would come on stage and he's like, I'm like, dude, you can't wear New Balances on stage. What are you doing? You know, he's like, man, they're really comfortable. I'm like, I don't care how comfortable they are. I'm not going on stage tonight if you wear those shoes, you know. But yeah, we always had to approve his shirts and his shoes to make sure, you know. So what's next? You said you were leaving on tour here coming up, right?
Yeah, I leave in 2 days for Europe and the UK for a month.
Okay, for a whole month. Very nice. Now, who are you going over there with?
Hmm. The artist is Lauren Ruth Ward.
Okay. How long you been playing with them?
She's I think I started playing with her October-ish of last year. I
Okay.
think we did our first kind of set of shows during that time. We just played South by Southwest a couple weeks ago.
How is South by Southwest
Yeah.
now? I haven't played it in a long time. Last time I was even close to it, I played something, and I don't even know if the festival's still going on. It was called Red Gorilla Festival, I think, and they
Hmm.
attached to South by Southwest, and they filled up all of the venues that were smaller than the South by Southwest venues. So it was like a festival outside of a festival that was already happening. And I remember there was like some
Oh,
beef
wow.
between South by Southwest and Red Gorilla Festival, and because they were basically leeching off their crowd. But
Yeah.
all that to ask, I heard South by Southwest has changed in the past, few years. How was it?
Hmm. This was actually my first time doing it. So I had a blast. I was kind of doing double duty, playing with another band as well, just doing some like smaller gigs. But I thought it was great. I mean, I didn't spend a lot of time like in the thick of it because I did have some other shows. I had a couple in San Antonio and then whatever. But yeah, I thought it was good. It was fun.
Yeah,
Austin's
people
a
don't.
vibe.
Austin's great. It's a food town, man. You can get some good food there. People don't get
Yeah.
Texas though. Like you can be there for 3 months and never get out of Texas. You're just playing shows in
Hmm.
Texas. There's a huge scene of music there I didn't even know about called the Red Dirt scene. And
I
it's
don't know.
bands that have just made a living playing in Texas and Oklahoma, and now they're getting a lot of national exposure. One that recently, Cody Johnston came up in kind of the Red Dirt scene. Cody Jinks, although he's not from Texas. Co Wetzel, we went out with them, and several others. It's very much kind of an outsider country vibe.
Mm.
Kind of more true original roots country and Southern rock. There's a lot of crossover between that, but they
Mm.
make a great living just touring in Texas and Oklahoma and a little bit outside of there, until people tell them like, "Hey, there's actually other states besides Texas that you could go to," and they're like, "Oh, really? We didn't know. It's so big. We've never reached the end
I
of
don't
it."
tell them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like we never knew. So that's cool. So what all? Yeah, you've got the shows coming up here in Europe. What do you got coming after that?
Ooh, I think there are some possible other shows with Lauren Ruth Ward as well. I think we're doing like a cool LA thing outside of actually, I don't know if I can say this. Never mind.
Never
Um,
mind. You never heard it here. They're not doing any shows
yeah.
ever.
Some stuff kind of in the works with her. And that's it at the moment. But
Okay.
honestly, I feel like things always kind of pop up.
Yeah. How do you juggle home life with, and I don't know what your home life is like. I'm not, but it's always interesting for me to hear from people how they juggle home life with road life. Um,
Mm.
because road life is it's a constant interruption to the regular events that happen in your life. Um,
Hmm.
how do you balance that, like, relationships and friendships, and um, how do you balance that when you're out on the road?
I mean, actually, interestingly enough, I have a partner that I have never been on tour and been with her yet. So, yeah, there's actually some discussion of like, what feels good for you communication wise, kind of setting some expectations, and just kind of, what feels good for you for talking, or can we talk at least once a day? Can we try to do a phone call here and there? What's your schedule tend to be like? So kind of just setting up some expectations. But I think one thing I learned over the years is just um, I had to let go of the feeling that I was going to be able to have a private conversation with my person on tour. So I got to the point where I was either like, I'm either going to be able to talk to you in front of everyone and everyone's just going to know my business, or I'm going to be trying to stand out on the sidewalk and not be able to hear you and it's going to be chaotic or cold or just any number of like interruptions. So I think I just had to like let my guard down and just be like, oh well, everyone's going to know my business. I'm just going to have to, communicate with you in public basically. And that was really helpful. um but yeah, I think just communication always in relationships is key. And um I feel like I've been very lucky to have been with people that are really, really supportive. I couldn't imagine being with someone that wasn't. And just like, I'm so happy for you to get to go live your dream and do what you do. And I'm going to work around this, the lack of schedule, we'll say, that you have in the meantime. And just that support really is like, just like means the world, knowing that you kind of have that little anchor there,
Yeah.
while everything else in your life can be chaos and unpredictable. But I think that leading up to tour, I think for me, it's like preparation. The more I can prep and have things in place, like, the less I have to stress when I'm actually in the moment and I can think about just what I'm there to do. I've been on tour with people that have so many chaotic things not taken care of at home, and that's all they can think about the whole time they're on the road. And it's just, ideally, you don't do that. And then I think getting back, just being really gentle with yourself, being realistic about the transition back into normal life, and just, I don't know, taking like that decompression time for yourself, to try to ease back into some sort of routine. But yeah, it's very, people don't realize how like disrupting it is, not having a schedule. Or, I mean, I'm like, I don't even have an eating schedule when I'm on tour. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't
Yeah.
have a sleeping schedule. I don't have an eating schedule.
Yeah, people are like,
I don't know
"What's
what
your
I
day
do.
like?" And I'm like, "Well, I wake up first, and then I open Google Maps to find out where we are, and is there any coffee close, you know?" And the
Hmm.
days I, dreaded were when you opened it up and it was just like mountains, and you're like, "Oh, it's one of
Yeah.
those days." Okay, so where are we? Oh, we're at Caveman Fest. Okay, we don't have cell service today. Well, that's great. Um, so
Hmm.
yeah, this time out, it was different because I was out before. My wife and I have been together since I was 16, and
Wow.
yeah, a long time. But this time I had, three kids that I had to also
Mm.
like manage those relationships too, and it was very interesting. All the way from a 15-year-old, he's 16 now. So like I'm showing him like how to tie a tie on a Zoom call. And I'm like, hey man, come here. No, you're doing it backwards because the video is backwards. Don't do that. Like you got to do it. He's going on his first, dance or whatever. And having to run in between
Oh.
sound check. And, she's like, you really got to show him. So, and then it's like, I
Hmm.
have my 6-year-old daughter. I have a 13-year-old too. And so all the way down to a 6-year-old daughter. And I could always tell when
Wow.
she got the phone because it was just emojis, and she knew how to she knew how to text and read like 4 or 5 words, so it'd start with like dad, Brooklyn, and I'm like, oh, okay, I see who has the phone, or it's just a million unicorns over and over. Like, okay, so
That's very sweet.
it was interesting trying to figure out how to involve them with my day to day, so that
Mm.
when you come back home, because there's a detachment there, right? That it's
Hmm.
like it takes you a little while to get back into that routine. You're a
For
stranger,
sure.
you've been gone, and so trying to reduce the amount of time it took to re-enter the the ecosphere that's supposed to be your home,
Hmm.
and cut that down so that they feel somewhat you know um a part of what's going on.
Hmm.
And so I had sound checks where my daughter was, I was like, hey, you want to go through sound check with me? Just, so she's like sitting there
Hmm.
playing Barbies and watching me sound check. And, it was just,
Yep.
we did as much as we could to, make them feel a part of it. And it still
Absolutely.
didn't work perfectly. Um, the one thing I found is there anything you found while being on the road that is a good tool um, to help the relationship stay healthy? For instance, the one that we found a long time ago was we really don't text about sensitive issues. So if it's an issue that's like contentious, or if it's an issue that could lead to an argument, or then I told her, this is a long time ago. because we've been married, I don't know, 21, 22 years now. Don't tell, I tell
Well,
her, I know how many years we've been married. I'm just joshing. Do you know? You don't, I don't know if you know. Um, I know it's like 24, that long. And she doesn't remember either. So I feel okay. Um, and so like, it'll be, I told her a long time, I said, I don't want to text about these things. So I'll just tell you, hey, I'll call you later. Can we talk about this one? And
hmm
that helped us because there's no voice inflection with text. So when you're traveling all the
hmm
time and you lose that voice inflection, there's a lot of perceived inflections that go and meanings. Is there anything you've found that help you kind of manage relationships? And people think this is funny because it's not really drumming, but it is. Like this is very much what life on the road can be like. Is there
hmm
anything you've found that helps you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely I agree with what you're saying. Nothing serious over text. Making sure to schedule like a video call every so often, like, hey, I have a day off. Let's do this time and this date. So we know we have something on the calendar to kind of do more of a face to face, even though I'm usually texting throughout the day. Also, like you said, I think like, hey, join me through my day. I'll send you a video sound check. Here's the coffee that I walked to. Here's a couple pictures from the show tonight or from last night. Trying to make someone feel like you're including them along the way. I mean, because it is exciting, to especially to an outsider perspective normally, right? Might not seem like it in the moment, but it is very exciting to other people as well. Um, yeah, communication is just such a huge one. I think really getting some face-to-face time or embracing any of the varying types of communication that we have available to us. I
For
think those
sure.
things are so important.
For sure. All right. So what are you working on in your drumming right now? Like what are some things that you're focused on when you're not, playing out that you're consciously trying to improve in your own playing?
Hmm. Right now, I've been thinking a lot about flow. So I've been kind of working on just kind of going through some exercises where like developing flow and consistency. Um, I take every once in a while lessons with Jeff Friedel, um, and he's my drum therapist, as I like to say. And we talk about I've talked to him about flow, about technique. Just recently, I had a lesson with him recently, and we were just talking about consistency. Like, I don't know, just like the really nuanced, like, if I hit the drum right in the center, if I hit it a little off the center, or if does everything sound exactly the same? Like, basically, just having, I don't know, like the control of being able to do what I'm trying to do. And then what happens when there is an inconsistency? Why is that? And I think for me, I spend a lot of time learning songs. So I have gotten to the point now, I love that app, Moises. I
Hmm.
can slow something down and loop it. I'm like, oh, I can't with this section right now. It's just this one little, the last half of the bridge or something like that. I just learned a couple of songs for these two music videos I did, and I try to get things as exact as possible because the music video, it's like you're gonna see. And I was just like, what is this part? And just like slowing it down and just like looping it until I'm like want to punch the wall. And I'm like, okay, it's there. I've got it now.
Yeah.
um,
I was telling some students the other day, I'm like, when I go on stage, the last thing I want to be worried about is, do I know the song? I don't even want to think
mhm,
about the song anymore because, you're going to have the bass amp fall off the drum riser because they didn't, the roadies didn't secure it. And so all of a sudden you got that and it's going out, but it also pulled your in-ears out. And so now you can't hear anything. And oh, yeah, I need to remember this song. It's like, I don't
mhm,
want to think about the song because there's going to be like 8,000 other things that all conspire
mhm,
against me to not be able to perform that night is how I
mhm,
felt most of the time.
mhm,
That really the music has to be a given, and to do that, I think we should spend like 8,000 times as much time listening to music as we do. I think people should listen to music all the time. And it's
Mm,
interesting, a lot of some of the session guys that I really respect in town, Aaron Sterling's one of them, and Scott Williamson, they're always listening to music. They reserve a
mm,
period of their day just to ingest new music. What's going on with this? What is this music? Oh, I've never listened to this. And they're always just listening. And I've tried
mm,
to do that, like, because I mean, my kids are much younger than me, as they should be. And I'm trying not to be like the grumpy old man. So when they get in, I'm like, hey, put on some music. I want to, play me something. So they all have their own playlist. They all definitely have different styles. And,
mm-hmm.
and some of them it feels like a seizure, the playlist does. And I'm like, could we pick a genre and just stick with it for like 3 songs? It's just like bluey, but then we're listening to Metallica, but also here's this country song I listened to. And hey, have you listened to this 70s funk? And I'm like, stop, 1 second. Just let me get my bearings. So I think we should spend so much time listening to music. And that's where I learn a
Mm,
lot of my music is the listening phase, as you said. I'm so sick of it by the
mm-hmm.
time we actually play it because I've listened to it so
Yeah,
much. So
that's
what's your process of learning a song, I guess? I want to respect your time. So as we're kind of wrapping things up, but what's your process of learning a song whenever you get a set and you're playing with another artist? How do you go about learning that music?
um I definitely have gotten a better system than before. I feel like I used to learn things and just be like, "Ah, why is this not sticking? Why is this not sticking? Oh my God, how many times can I listen to this and like not like it's just not sinking in the way that it needs to?" And then I, in recent years, have had the moments where I'm like, I have so many things to learn. I have to write all of this out. And it turns out that, and obviously, I mean, this is not like new information for anybody, but I will sit down, I'll listen to everything, just, you know, I'll have them send me the music and I'll just give everything a listen, just like blanket listen. And then I will go through again and I'll make a chart of the arrangement, just kind of paper, pen to paper, okay, bridge, chorus, just the arrangement of the song. And then I'll go through and start charting. Um, I think Jeff told me I have like Nashville charts. I don't know what that
Yeah.
means, but they're a little shorthand and they're a little color coded, whatever works for me. Um, so I find that when I chart and I write all of that out meticulously, and it's so tedious. I mean, you're just like, oh God, this is like, it's hard to sit down and write out something for one song for an hour. You're like, I have 25 of these to do. Like, this
Mhm.
is, it's a bit daunting. Um, but once I do that, I've found that I've like critically listened to the song. I went through and I really, really had to use my ears and pay attention. And I feel like once I've gotten that chart down, when I sit down at the drums, then I'm just putting it in my body. And it's like I'll actually see the chart in my head of like the next section that's coming up or something, because I've spent so much time already in front of the paper showing me the blueprints, I guess, to the song. Um, so I'll do that. And like I said, if there's always like parts that you're like, oh, that's going to be a little bit more tricky for me or whatever. Those are the things that all then kind of like loop sections or I think I heard you talking about this in a podcast or something recently where it's just like, starting with, okay, the intro and then the verse. Okay, do I have that down? And then kind of moving through the rest of the song from
Mhm.
there and just kind of like piecing it together.
Yeah.
And then sometimes if I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was reaffirming. I love the delay on Zoom. It's like, yeah, and then you interrupt them like 4 words later. You know, go right ahead.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Um, where was I going with that? All that being said, though, I mean, it depends on how much time you have with stuff before you have to play it. I love a good cheat sheet on stage,
Yeah, I do too.
Sometimes
And
I just
there was an app I used. Um, that I could import the set list, and I forget what it was. Maybe I deleted it. I don't remember. Mobile Sheets, that's what it's called, Mobile Sheets.
Hmm.
And I could just import, I could take a picture of it, scan it in there. So I'd have the hard copy, but I'd also have the
Mm-hmm.
scanned copy in my phone and on mobile devices, so I could share it between anything. And for me, I'm the same way. I don't have a photographic memory, but if I've made a chart of it, I can remember that section as it's coming up, and it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
blurry, but I see things that I tell everybody, I'm like, look, music notation is simply something that's so that you remember something that's supposed to happen. And it's not a perfect art form, and they can't notate
Mm-hmm.
with a swung feel. Like, what does that mean? That doesn't mean anything to me. Like, swing is about 8 million different things with a swung feel. What it should say is like, go listen to this song. It feels like that, you know? That would be helpful. Not like with a swung feel, like, you know, chan, 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 chan. Anyway, so whenever I'm learning that song, I just try to I'll make drawings, you know, whatever I can on the chart that like reminds me of that thing that's going to happen there. Or I have all these like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Petty hats. That means like Tom Petty hi-hats. He loved it. Da, 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 you know, these chunky hi-hats where you're accenting all the beats, or, you know, in a Beatles
Mm-hmm.
feel, or, you know, I don't know. I write all these things that only mean something to me, but it's very
For
much a
sure.
shorthand method. And the Nashville way of writing a chart is very shorthanded, where they
Mm-hmm.
write, for anybody that doesn't know, they write numbers for the chords. So instead of writing this as a C major 7, they'll just write it's a 1 chord. Because if we're in C, it's a 1-7. And a 1-7 is the same in B flat as it is in C. It's still the tonic of the key that you're in. And so that way you can transpose, you know, if it's a 1-5, you know, whether it's B flat or it's C or whatever, G, whatever key we're in, you can transpose that very quickly because, oh, it's a 1, it's a 5, it's a 4.
Mm-hmm.
And for drummers, there's even a more shorthand way that we write, kind of an abbreviated type of a deal. But I find that a
Mm-hmm.
lot of my students, I think it's great that we have the sheet music we have these days available online, if it's correct. And there's a lot of it that's not, by the way. They'll come in and I'm like, are you playing the same song that I'm hearing? Oh, that's what the sheet music said. I'm like, did you listen to the song before you read the sheet music? Because this is not the same song.
Mm.
But they get so concerned with not hitting every note, and they get really
Mm-hmm.
anxious about that. And so I rip the charts up and I'm like, give me that stupid sheet music, you know? I'm like, just play the
Mm-hmm.
song. It's a blues. This is a blues progression. What's a blues progression? I'm like, can you hear that? It's a 12-bar blues. Like, listen to that. And so I found that them
Mm-hmm.
making these charts, like what we're talking about, which are kind of zoomed out chord charts, it really
Mm-hmm.
helps them get the form of the song, because they might know the sheet music, but they don't actually
Mm-hmm.
know, hey, are you in the intro? Are you in the bridge? What section are you in? What's happening right now? Is this a
Mm-hmm.
breakdown? Like, what is going on in the song? I'm in bar, 372. It's like, okay, what? All right,
Oh
take your
gosh.
nerd glasses off and don't do that. Like, let's just play the song. And so I don't know. I'm glad that you see visually the charts, and when it comes to reviewing the song, even though that takes a long time, and it does, as you say, we would have
Mm-hmm.
songs that we didn't play for 6 months, and 10 minutes before we go on, they're like, hey, we're playing that song. And I'm like, hold on 1 second, hold my beer. And I'm like looking through, I'm like, there's my chart.
Yep.
And I would listen
Yep.
to it and read the chart, and I would remember it
Mm-hmm.
just like I had, practiced it or something.
Oh, for
So,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was saying at the beginning of this combo that there are people that I play with, I don't know, once or twice a year. And same thing. I'm just like, oh, yeah, let me pull up those charts. And I'm like, oh, I already have half of the set written out. I just need to like look this over and review,
Yeah.
and then I'm good.
Yeah.
I
And
love that. Yeah.
I'm old school too. I keep a physical copy of the music. And I know some people don't do that, but I get freaked out with like, what happens if this computer stops working? What happens if we're on a festival and all of a sudden all my electronics are on the fritz because it's 8,000 degrees out here? It's
Mm-hmm.
like
Oh, yeah,
having that physical copy is kind of, I think it's just reassurance for me that things aren't going to go,
for
not going to go
sure.
south. So, well, cool. I
And I
appreciate you
think
taking the time. I don't want to take up your entire day. I know that you got things to do to get ready to leave, but I really appreciate you taking the time. Where can everybody find you, find out more about you, hear you?
I am on Instagram as Jess the Drummer, Jess. And let's see, where else? I think everything is pretty much Jess the Drummer or Jessica Goodwin, Facebook. I think
Very nice.
YouTube
And
is Jess Drums.
we'll try to link some of that too in the show notes so
Okay,
everybody can find you. But if you come through Nashville, hit me up. And thanks so
absolutely.
much for taking the time. Be safe. Be careful on the road. Take
Thank you,
care of yourself.
Stephen.
All right. We'll talk
Appreciate
soon.
it.
Bye.
Bye.